Strange. So I think either way, Elazer versus Clem or GuMiHo versus Clem could be really, really fun. To totally discount Strange, but Clem's pretty good. In the top left of Hard Lead, we have Team Liquid's Elazer. And at the bottom right, we do have GuMiHo, who is now on Cloud 9. It's a really org. It's a really big org. It's really cool. But seriously, no longer teamless. One of the... Not the first pickup of the big team pickups for StarCraft. Navi also signing Spirit last week, I believe, and probably a few more to come, actually, leading up to, I'll say maybe sometime next summer, you know, just, I don't know any reason. But anyway, we got GuMiHo going for a forward 2 racks. He has actually done forward 1 racks, and it does actually look to be that 1 rack, so... Nope, he is in the forward position, but it is still going to be a 1 racks expand. I think he's one of the only Terrans who does this consistently, at least. As the other Terrans that do a forward base placement, usually still 2 racks, like a Cure or a Byun. We do have Koreans on the European server closed qualifier, because server is the really important word right there. All you gotta do is play on the server of the titled qualifier. So the Asia server qualifier was a couple days ago. This is the European server, and then the weekend we'll have the North American server, which everyone who loses out here today can go ahead and try their luck once again, starting tomorrow, and then close qualifiers on Sunday. If you were around yesterday, you might have seen the grueling path taken to get to the closed qualifiers for some of these players. For some others, they are actually seeded, and that is how the bracket actually is supposed to go. Someone is actually impersonating me. Apparently, they have the clan tag Sester, because you can't make duplicate clans. But you can make duplicate names, which is kind of, kind of sucks, but anyway. So, yeah, the way that it's set up is that the seeded player into the closed qualifier, because of their performance of the regionals, I believe the regionals... If not that, then it's the performance of the previous tournament. But anyway, it is going to be up against the person who got through the open qualifier. So in this case, pretty easy to discern who is who, because Elazer is actually from Europe. He was in the region locked, if you want to use that word, regionals. And so he is invited to the European closed qualifier. GuMiHo had to beat out a couple of good named players in the open bracket. I'm not sure exactly what his road here was, but there were definitely quite a few good players in the open yesterday. Which unfortunately, I didn't really get to cast very much because my internet kept cutting out, so we're just hoping that doesn't happen today. We do have GuMiHo now into the thick of his build, which is going to be an armory build. So he did go 1x expand, swap over to the factory. Difference is, it's all on the front. Elazer has yet to get any scouting, and that is something Elazer does a lot. Now, that doesn't mean Elazer loses everything he doesn't scout, but I do wonder if it's a weakness. Sometimes Elazer still looks amazing in this matchup, especially around that mid-game when he really gets things going. He can be the aggressive Zerg that we do know him for, even in this matchup, but this is a very early attack heading his way, and there are no super strong defenses against it. We are about to have 6 queens, but then the trick would actually be having them on the front lines. This is pretty much the quickest attack you can really make, actually, when it comes to a Hellbat. Or any early pressure, I mean, besides like the 2 rocks. So that's the that's like the double-edged sword. It's very, very early, so you get the surprise of the Zerg player who like literally just built their next 3 queens. But then you actually don't have that many units. But the difference that GuMiHo has thrown in here is 2 extra Reapers. And that can mean a lot as far as crowd controlling the queens, spreading the lings out as they try and get a full surround, and actually adding a little DPS as well. It's working out pretty well, as a lot of the queens have already gone down. Obviously, they also don't have a lot of transfuses, but one was used to try and save the day. The drones are now under attack. Unfortunately, Hellbats are slow, but not if you use the drone to go attack. Jesus. It kind of looked like that was on purpose. Maybe he's trying to stop them from getting into the nooks and crannies. I don't know. Or mistiming the death of the Hellbats. Maybe that was it. That was a little close. 2 drones do end up going down, but so do 4 queens and 20 lings. And now 20 lings doesn't sound like a lot, but again, keep in mind how early this attack was. So that is something worth considering, especially as those queens also didn't just die. They used up all their energy, and they now are fresh queens on the field that haven't been injecting. Main was injected, actually. The third wasn't injected. There you go. Or creep spreading. So that has been a little bit delayed. We do have GuMiHo going into mech, by the way, continuing with some Hellbat pressure, too. I mean, he keeps on building Hellions, and as long as the Zerg player is under-defended, why not keep turning them into Hellbats, I guess? But eventually, queens collected together do end up doing the trick. That is usually what starts the defense off against a build like this, is a good collection of queens. So generally, it's better, yeah, to go for the Hellions and try and get the sneak attack, because the queens still aren't very fast, nor do they kill even Hellions all that quickly. It's more of a stubborn Zerg versus stubborn Terran when it comes to Hellbat versus queen fights. Third CC on the way for GuMiHo, as well as those extra factories. He already has the armory, obviously, so starts up that +1 attack. Is going to bother getting Cloak for his single Banshee. Actually make a second one. And we are going into some battle mech, which has changed. I don't know if the consensus is out that it is better. I would say it is, but change is maybe the safer word to use. And it looks like he's just going to go ahead and consistently pump out Banshees. Maybe even eventually get Hyperflight Rotors if the Banshees survive long enough. But anyway, so it's changed. So the Cyclones, you know, they actually deal with lings better. They still are susceptible to surrounds, and well, that's actually pretty much it. I mean, they're susceptible to surrounds and getting pushed back to a non-microable defensive position. That's what they've always been weak to, and that so much hasn't changed. In fact, it is going to be Hyperflight Rotors. So, you know, the first Banshee, not a big deal. The second Banshee, not a big deal. And then suddenly it's 5 Banshees with speed and cloak taking on your 5th and 6th expansions, while you're also under pressure from the battle mech. That shit's annoying. I'm really talking from the few times that I do play Zerg when I say that, but also watching it when the Zerg player hasn't gotten a solid foundation, and watching the professionals also deteriorate against that style. Yeah, it kind of, I don't know, it bothers even me as a commentator. And that's the ideal situation for the Terran, the unideal for the Zerg. The Zerg player, if they do a decent job with the first wave of aggression, the battle mech, the Banshees, and then they usually have a pretty solid foundation, and they don't unravel such as we would do against the same thing. And 5 bases are on the way for Elazer, but there's that under-defended 5th. Actually, the Banshees want to get some drones. They go on to an under-defended 4th. Overseer is slow, but coming around. And the 5th, yeah, probably would have survived. The Overseer was close enough, I would say. Scan even reveals the Overseer, as well as the army, I think, looking to see if there was more roaches, less roaches, Ravagers, because the army... The battle mech was coming on forward, including a Raven, which I didn't really catch. I saw it on the unit tab and then didn't really think about it. But yeah, the Raven being included is interesting, too. I do like that addition, just as the cleanup. So many scans have to be used to try and clear up all of the creep as you beat bop back and forth. It's, I'd say, unlikely that the battle mech gets to have their one big push, but if it's going well, then of course they're going to push, and I think it's exactly what's happening here. Elazer is a little light on the army units and is now supply blocked, so GuMiHo sees the opportunity and just, you know, goes for it. Why not? The Banshee's also adding in DPS even as the Queens try and take them down. The Cyclone's getting all types of lock-ons, and the Hellbats also getting into the thick of things, barbecued up some drones right there. There might just be just enough reinforcements from the Zerg player to call this a hold. GuMiHo giving away a lot of units, but mostly Hellbats for that. The 3 Cyclones and 2 Banshees going down to the most expensive, but mostly Hellbats, which, I mean, when we're talking about 24 Hellbats, and I guess minus, like, 12? So I guess 12 went down there in that particular battle. That's not that much. You know, 1,000, 1,200 minerals, sure, okay, that sounds like a decent bit, but we are on 4 bases, and more so, the Hellions are very quick to replace, aren't they? Well, now the reactor Cyclones are also kind of quick to replace, too, I guess. Cyclones. But we do count that as a hold for Elazer. It is still a unideal situation for the Zerg, who's kind of been following the footsteps of GuMiHo rather than taking any control of the game. That's not totally uncommon leading up to the big swell of Zerg, so that's not the worst thing. It's recoverable. It's just that you really would have liked to have a little more creep spread. You would have liked to have taken some of these engagements more on their side of the map, or on this plateau right here, or something along those lines, and instead, you are purely defensive, which also means the Cyclones really have a lot of room for them to pull back. If they do need to skedaddle, realizing the fight's not going to go well, they can pull back off of creep and have tons of room to reinforce. And this is where the battle mech usually shines, is going beep-bopping back and forth, left, right, center base, left, right, center base. And that's, again, where that Raven, allowing all of this creep cleanup, is, I don't know, particularly useful. Obviously, it's also useful when it does come into bio play, but I'm really feeling it for the battle mech, actually. The one weakness is that it's a little slower, and obviously you gotta control it a little bit differently, but if you do keep it alive, which GuMiHo so far has done, that's a really helpful addition. That's a lot of Cyclones, not a lot of Hellions, but there's also not that many Lings, so the threat of a surround not quite here yet. Accidental Swarm Host on the way, but more importantly, 4 Vipers. That's what you need. Some Abducts can go down, sure, but then also some Blinding Clouds, which pushes the army forward because the AI is stupid. That's what's really useful. Corrosive Biles actually managing to connect a few times. GuMiHo at this point deciding that divvying up the army, a 2-pronged attack is the way to go, and I think he is right about that. Elazer is doing a good job against the main attack, but divvying it up does catch him by surprise a little bit. Some drones going down, not a massive amount. Elazer still above 80 on 5 bases. It's just this utter lack of creep spread and the utter lack of counterattack that really starts to get quite worrying. A tank now anchoring in kind of shines a light on GuMiHo's intentions. It is now time to move away from the battle mech stage. Now, a couple of tanks to anchor battle mech or defend back at home in case you do get overwhelmed. That doesn't necessarily always mean they're transitioning, but we're also into 12 minutes. Elazer has successfully defended 5 bases. So I think it is around this time that you would expect the Terran player to move on, basically, over into more standard battle mech and possibly even into Thors if this game goes that long. The Roach Ravager composition is working out barely enough, but the Roaches are starting to go down here, and that means the Ravagers are going to be vulnerable. All right, it is going to be just barely enough. The Cyclones, when they are tagged by units, when they're hit by the Roaches, hit by the Lings, hit by the Corrosive Bile, they are vulnerable. Glass cannons, yet still. So that can quickly change in the blink of an eye. It is the Banshees that are being the big nuisance, as you would expect. 5 Banshees actually having already gone down. These 2 looking to go down as well to a couple parasitic bombs. I don't know if GuMiHo had scouted that it has a hive. No, he has not scouted the Zerg as a hive. So that was the first indication, but it is also, I guess, in the kind of similar what I was talking about with the tanks. It's around that time. You know, the Zerg player isn't on a hive. They're in a lot of trouble, because they have not been able to max out and get any sort of counter-aggression going. But if they're on a hive, there is still hope yet, especially as the Abducts come through for the tank transition, which 4 tanks anchoring this position would have been especially brutal, but it looks like it might have been enough regardless. Elazer just cannot get enough units to defend, and this was a colossal loss of life. And GuMiHo, with relentless aggression and the addition of the tanks, is finally able to get this first game. It really was relentless. I mean, he was aggressive from the 4.5-minute Hellbat attack. It never really stopped. Hecate's our second map in the top right for Cloud9 and up 1. He is GuMiHo. In the bottom left, we do have Team Liquid's Elazer. So Elazer put up a good fight, but he was, as I'd said, constantly behind GuMiHo, following in his footsteps, rather than getting any actual new trail blazed for himself, which eventually caught up to him. Eventually, the units went down in too big of numbers, especially the more expensive units like the Ravagers, and he knew that it was over. Despite the Vipers coming out in an opportune time without the extra 50 supply, I want to say, you know, would usually max out Zerg versus 150, 160-ish mech. Would actually be, like, okay. You know, he just couldn't actually win out against GuMiHo's army at the end. And it all started with the Hellbat attack. Don't think GuMiHo's going to do it again just because it worked once. That is absolutely a halberd attack. That is one best of... Not even best of 3, I would usually say. Maybe like a best of 5, you would throw that really fast halberd attack in. Or a halberd attack in general, considering how much it's been memed on for good reason. But GuMiHo is unique. So he threw it out in the first game of a best of 3, and it worked. It did a lot of damage, direct damage, considering the time at which it happened. Can be easy to say that that's not enough if we're thinking about more like the 5-minute halberd attack rather than the 4-minute, I guess. But it was, and it was a lot of disruption to Elazer's tempo too, which is always something that Terran wants to do to the Zerg. And Elazer would have loved to have done it in turn with like a run-by later on, or a big swell of units that surprised GuMiHo's map control, but he never got that happening. So GuMiHo's going to forward position his barracks once again, but this time around not going to go for the Reapers. And those extra 3 Reapers for the halberd attack really was a bit of a difference that I think Elazer was not expecting. That crowd control aspect of the grenades, but also their ability to work well against Lings, ditto with the Hellbats. And the fact that it is just 2 more units, I guess, than usual. Usually it's 1 Reaper. It is important. It's such an early attack. This time around, it's going to be 3 Marines, and they are clearly gunning for the Overlord. I mean, certainly, GuMiHo didn't have to worry about being scouted so much in the last game, but realized the Overlord was chilling over a pillar, and knew that there would be an opportune moment to get the kill, and... whether or not Elazer was or was not going to get scouting is not really the issue. It's just like you just literally kill an early Overlord. 100 minerals having to be invested into so early on. Another egg too, I guess, which is not the worst, but 100 minerals, absolutely. And you do lose all sites on the front lines. Maybe this Overlord was ever destined to go into the natural or main base, but it at least could have seen Hellions popping out and the attack underway through the middle of the map whenever it does happen. Marines just running out to see if there's any other Overlords trying to replace them. And that's why you see, I would say, a lot of the Korean Zergs, because I think this is more of a Korean Terran opener, actually, the Marine opener. Like the beat bob between Reaper, Marine, Reaper, Marine, Reaper, Marine, to try and get these Overlords. You see, like, Solar just sometimes have his Overlord back here. It's like, well, it's never going to get any scouting done, but it definitely will survive, so great stuff. I thought he wasn't going to do another halberd attack, and he isn't, actually, but it is going to be a... I don't know what this is, actually. This is a Marine... kind of Hellion drop with a fast second barracks. Not 3rd CC. Not yet. He will get one, but emphasizing that second barracks. So kind of turning this into a 2-1-1 after making it look like a Hellion opener? Well, the Hellion's going to get surrounded by Elazer's aggressive Ling placement, or almost surrounded. It's enough Lings that they should be able to win this out. And doesn't that take the wind out of the sails a little bit here? The Marines and the Medivac were supposed to coordinate with the Hellions, attacking some of the creep tumors, and then the Medivac goes in the main. It seems like... well, it's still worth using the Medivac, of course, but... now you really have 0 map control without the Hellions. But it is turning into, like I said, kind of a 2-1-1. I don't know if he's gonna add a reactor and then swap the starport over. No, that doesn't make any... no, that's not gonna happen. I think he's just going to literally add the reactor onto the starport. It's just... yeah, and a tech lab onto the factory. The tanks will be the safest thing to get here first, even if the Elazer... I wouldn't say he's usually that much of a Roach player if he's not facing mech, but, you know, he obviously could. This could even turn into a 2-on-1 kind of push. I mean, if you get the tech lab that fast, you can get 2 tanks with your stim. Okay, and you still have 2 medivacs because you produce them individually. I think I see what's going to be put up here. It's a different direction. It's a different path to the same destination. But kind of like a 2-base attack. Obviously not super committed, but a 3rd CC. Coming in a little bit later than it usually would. Also, the barracks coming down long before the engineering bay. I mean, you compare this to Clem, 1 racks, 1-1-1, 3 CC, double engineering bay. You know, it's very different. Okay, so Roaches are on the way for Elazer. He's going to play that style, but he also doesn't know what GuMiHo is doing. So there's that. Now he's going to figure it out. Stim is finished, so it's not just a weird number of non-bio Marines, you know? Guy is actually going into bio. Apparently Stim not strictly necessary. Stim was just a second away from finishing As the Ling's got this around, but there is kind of an argument about not stimming. So they lose the health without combat shields. It's quite a bit of health, too. It is enough queens, though. I think that's the most important thing. Once again, queens being the go-to early game defense. But the 2-on-1, which it kind of was, but not kind of, sure, whatever. It's not necessarily about the first push. If the first push can get a lot of damage, well then great. But when you have so many tanks already, it can be about that follow-up. It's if GuMiHo felt, I think, confident actually doing it. It's such a big map that I actually can't, like, the map itself, I should be deterred from guessing he will move out. It's such a big map, and I don't think there's any particularly strong angles to take for a tank. Basically just here on the 4th base of Elazer. Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily worth it. But when he does move out, you know, even if it's not with 2 tanks, but whatever it will be quite a few. Combat shields, not even halfway done. He is going to do the move out. From 3rd CC to Elazer's 4th, it's not that long of a path, and the creep spread was successfully stopped, halted. So that's where the tanks are going to line up, and 3 of them pretty early on. Elazer is going to have some defenses, but then the tanks get sieged up. It's going to be hard to break them. That's a lot of roaches for what the, you know, if it was only Marines, but 3 tanks do get sieged up. So now the roaches trying to descend upon the tanks through a little bit of a choke. They're going to get blasted, but the Marine fodder on the front lines might not last long enough for the tanks to do their work, and that's kind of the issue right here. As the Queens once again add in and truly help out by tanking, adding a little bit of damage, and Elazer will in fact hold on. Now that seemed like a decent trade on the just the eye test, I suppose. Like, well, a lot of Roaches and Ravagers went down, the Lings went down, and that did also almost push into the hatchery. But GuMiHo's supply plummeted because his macro is not looking so hot. I will say it is like 3 in the morning for the Koreans. That's another reason why European server qualifiers aren't really the hot spot for Koreans. Not only is their ping absolutely terrible coming in here, but then the timing of this is really atrocious. Or at least the Americas qualifier happens at like 9 a.m. their time, which is, you know, livable, even if it's not necessarily their usual gaming time. So I'm going to go ahead and blame it on that one. GuMiHo, though, has, let's be real, has had moments where he's looked like the worst macroer of the best Terrans, you know? Like, kind of like a backhanded compliment or something. A front-handed insult, I don't know what you want to call it. But, you know, he's really good. He gets to the GSL finals. He's won one in the past. But sometimes he just looks like he has terrible macro. His mechanics have, I personally would say, held him back from being a multi-GSL winner. And I think that has hurt him here. Now, Elazer is also starting to bank quite a few minerals and gas, but the most important thing was that he got it when he needed it most. Now, if his counter push does not end up winning the game, which it seems like it will not, then this could go on for another 3 or 4 minutes, and the big macro mistake from GuMiHo going up to 1,000 minerals as he tried to push. Like, that is a thing of the past, kind of. It obviously still influences the game as far as making GuMiHo, you know, not win with the push. Take damage on the 3rd from the Elazer's counterattack. Be forced into a super turtle game, perhaps. But it will be forgotten as far as it ruining the game, because it hasn't technically ruined it. GuMiHo is still in here. Elazer now has a lot of room to play with. You know, obviously not only the counterattack being more scary because you don't have the 1,000 minerals worth of Marines that you need, but then it also just completely halts all your momentum that you might have had. GuMiHo was grabbing a 4th command center and orbital, by the way. So it's not like he was all-inning on 3 bases, but nonetheless, you can keep up a certain amount of aggression if your macro is really, really good, and that's why I like to highlight it whenever Clem is able to. Play out or TVZ, is that oftentimes he'll be doing the exact same maneuvers on the front line, and then everything else on the back line will be immaculate. Like, not for GuMiHo. We are getting into this 4-base versus like 6-base setup for the Zerg player. Elazer's getting all this time to finally spread his wings and really enjoy being a Zerg player, which he wasn't able to do in the last game. And he did get here through Roach Ravager, but now moving back over into more of a Ling Bane emphasis and perhaps even into Ultras, which you always got a question mark on that one because Ultras aren't that great still. But, you know, they are added in. Cyril doing good things with the very swift Ultra Remax. in his regional games versus Clem. Yeah, that's what it was. So, you know, if Elazer can replicate Cyril, that's the best way to do it, to break a Turtle Terran, which at this point GuMiHo is, because, well, one, he does it occasionally, but then two, you know, he kind of was forced into it. Elazer has the maxed out army as well as the technology, a little preemptive on the upgrades though, and there is some good SimCity. A Liberator being obnoxious, tanks well placed, command centers adding to the SimCity, but still being appropriately canceled is really important here. That could have been 1,200 minerals lost. Instead, it is 200, with this particular command center actually living the tail of the tail. 13 SCVs did go down, but the command centers all live. SCVs live on the backside too, so they go right back to mining. And GuMiHo, with a pretty fantastic hold, cannot get ahead of himself. This is not the time to actually go back out into the map. Elazer's Remax was swift, full of the fastest units possible, and that just simply was not enough army left over for GuMiHo to actually get on the map like he thought he could. He wanted to get some creep spread at the very least cleaned up, but that was not the call there, and Elazer is just going to go ahead and relentlessly aggress onto GuMiHo's side of the map. GG's. Elazer will tie up the series 1-1. Now it's all tied up 1-1. In the top right of Alcyone, it is GuMiHo. Bottom left, it is Elazer. So this is a best of 3 leading into a best of 5 qualifying match. But they do have the lower bracket to get through as well. And the lower bracket also awards an additional qualifying placement because Cyril was able to win both summer and winter regionals. So usually you would be the top 6 to make it through this close qualifier into IEM Katowice, but this time around it's top 7. So, you know, you can kind of thank Cyril. I mean, you can. It's just the argument would be, as we see a command center first from GuMiHo this time. If you're needing that 7th spot to barely squeeze into IEM Katowice, then maybe you wouldn't. Thank you, next doormats, for the Prime sub. Then maybe you wouldn't actually get it anyway, I guess, but it's more like, I guess, the 7th seed, the 7th qualifier spot is really thankful. But then whoever faced Cyril in those finals, so Clem, I guess. So the Clem is actually quite upset at it. Who had a shot at taking down Cyril, but actually did not play as maybe 100% best this time around. Anyway, GuMiHo going for the command center first. High ground barracks as well. Changing things up a little bit. You know, his last strategy, I don't think was bad at all. The execution was absolutely what fell on its face. And you don't say that too often about the pros. That's the nice thing about watching professional esports, is that generally you push the mechanics by the wayside unless they're truly spectacular. And then you can just talk about the strategy and the positioning of the army and the mental game and so on and so forth. But in this case, in the last game's case, it was absolutely GuMiHo making a really atrocious macro mistake. Is to say that all professionals, that we're seeing here today, for instance, all are perfect on the macro is false. There are people who are better, who have that little bit extra. That's why Innovation was known for so long as the best macro, even though obviously a lot of people he's facing also had good macro. But to have an egregious 1,000 mineral bank in professional StarCraft is bad. It is straight up bad. It's straight up wow, I can't believe I did that for a lot of pros. There's a certain amount of minerals that can be excused, like when a Protoss has finished all 10 gateways and warps in 1,000 minerals at once of charge lots, or when the Terran player slaps down, let's say, 450 minerals worth of barracks. So 3 barracks get slapped down at the same time. That's actually quite common and kind of works out in favor of the Terran as they can coordinate their macro cycle better while doing that. But 1,000 minerals? And his production was also, I think a lot of it was finished. Nah, that absolutely ruins his follow-up. Any type of momentum or drops he could have had, or even just the better transition into a turtle gam. he's not going to be deterred from that strategy, and maybe thinking the same thing that I'm talking about, which is like, whoa, I really messed up right there. Let's get things together, get some more coffee, get a Red Bull, whatever it is. Monster Energy, sorry. But he's going to maybe do better on the follow-up this time, because it is a very similar build. Besides the Command Center first. It is the 2-1-1, but with the Hellions. Well, the Reaper also came out first. The Barracks didn't try and lift and kill their Overlord. So, overall, very similar. And this time around, perhaps the Hellions also will not be surrounded. So, while the mechanics were certainly to blame for a large part of that loss for GuMiHo, there was also a nip in the bud of his strategy to a degree. So yeah, I can't forget about that. Now the medevac with the Marines in it will be coordinated with the Hellions and the Reaper this time around to distract Elazer. And he did get supply blocked once again, just a little bit later on. Quick to fix it, but he doesn't know the strategy that his opponent is doing. All he saw was that it was a command center first. That's all he has seen. Even the two supply depots actually are perfectly ambiguous as to what the follow-up is. Because if you saw all four, maybe it's actually pumped out Hellions on a reactor. Maybe it's a Hellbat attack. Maybe it's a committed 2-base. But you just don't know based off what Elazer is seeing. Now he knows as he sees the Marines drop out. And should also expect the Hellions. With only 3 Hellions. Where'd they go? Those aren't the Hellions. These are the Hellions. With only 3 Hellions, are not usually the biggest deal, but it is enough to one-shot the drones. And that's really all they have to do. Overlord number 2, not quite going to go down as the Marines head into the main base. Lings are there, but realizing that they can't actually tango with the Marines so well without the Queens. The Marines do have a little bit of a tucked-in scenario, too. They kind of get rid of it, though. And that is a pretty full surround. Under the Queen's watchful eye, the medevac, it's very, very low. And the Elazer did try and play that as wise as possible, basically, because he wasn't perfectly set up to handle that. So you're going to have to give a little bit just to make sure things don't entirely deteriorate. And so he gave quite a few Lings, as well as 8 drones in total. But somewhat thanks to the Hellions sacrificing themselves like I was talking about. GuMiHo's third CC is done. His stim was done. His combat shields is on time. That was also, I think, a little bit late in the last game. I think he actually bought an engineering bay this time, which I just remember seeing 2 at once last game. So he was further delayed on that as well. And I think we do have GuMiHo fixing his mistakes from earlier. Although he still maybe needs to build... Oh, he's waiting for his reactors. Oh, and he's going 8 racks on 3 bases. So this is now, I mean, extra important. It's always important to spend your minerals in StarCraft. Yeah. But, like, this is really all about momentum. If his momentum gets stopped because he makes a clumsy mistake with his mineral bank or a clumsy mistake on the front lines because all his tanks surrounded on siege, whatever it is, then it's just done, man. Like, the momentum halted that quickly, that abruptly is just so painful for an 8-raxer. But the, better option is that you take maybe a little more of a cautious approach to begin with, like GuMiHo is doing. The tanks are sieged far back from really hitting anything, not even hitting the creep spread, but they are guaranteed to survive, basically. And then you really get your powerful punch later on when your 8-rax is really in effect. And as long as you can continue building, you don't get your SCVs decimated, then you actually have so much staying power. Even if you do get abruptly surrounded one time and you're like, okay, that wasn't the greatest, the staying power in the 8 racks can be enough to overwhelm as the Zerg player. Will take the wins where they can get them on the offensive, but still have to worry about making sure they have enough banelings behind any type of aggressive maneuver they make. Making sure they have enough larva is usually a very big thing as well. Now, the Roach Ravager composition of Elazer does help with the larva problem, but with all the tanks that will be continuing to be pumped out, if they do not get a good concave, they can be vulnerable there. Banelings are still usually the, I would say, still the most important thing, just because if you ever take a fight as a Zerg player and it doesn't go swimmingly, you don't just completely obliterate the Marine and tanks. If you don't have defensive Banelings in reserve to stop them from stimming on top of your army, you might be dead. So the Baneling nest finishes up. No typical hooks anytime soon, but it is done, and it looks like the fear of having that happen is not yet here, as Elazer has been pretty calmly taking care of the attack so far. GuMiHo kind of divvied up his army, as you can see, with 2 medevac drops that seem to have been mostly taken down, actually. So Elazer did a great job on the left side. Also having a macro hatchery on top of 5 hatcheries. Counting's hard. will be excellent. And he's also getting a hive, so GuMiHo hasn't really been able to, I want to say, kind of dig in and really scare Elazer, and that's becoming more and more of a problem. If Elazer can get to a max out army with Vipers and has to sacrifice this gold base, which it seems like he has to do, I actually think that's fine. Sacrificing the gold base is, I would say, an easy sacrifice, actually, as he does still have 4 bases overall, and can grab this 5th one in the bottom right that's very far away from GuMiHo actually attacking it. So I think it's totally fine. Also, the gold base going down isn't really a strong domino, I would say. It doesn't lead to this super abusive, like, this big of a choke, you know, that GuMiHo can then stick on and really push the dominoes down farther. So many avenues of attack that we have Elazer setting up for it, too. He is handling this like a pro. Actually emphasizing his upgrade before any Vipers come out. Oh, 1 Viper is out, my bad. And we do see that a lot of the time, because he can't afford everything all at once. But he could probably afford a second. So the problem now is the supply. Just as far as getting a couple of Abducts, and maybe a Parasitic Bomb or a Blinding Cloud on a balled up Marine army. More is better. GuMiHo, by the way, he did 8 racks, and it is fairly committed, but there are times where it does enough damage or the game is at a stalemate enough, which you can kind of call this one a stalemate, in which you can transition over into a 4th base. The big problem is usually that you don't have a lot of tanks, you don't have a lot of factory units, so moving on into the later game can be extremely difficult. You also don't have, you know, your 4th base already set up, so that can be a point of contention if they do end up breaking your frontline army. But if you get there, you get the 2 tanks at a time. If you never lost any tanks to begin with on your forward push, with only just now 1 tank going down, and your 4th base does get settled, apparently on the gold, then it's kind of fair game, actually. Elazer might have done a great job not letting this overwhelm him and losing to the momentum-based 8 racks, but as far as winning the game, no, hasn't actually happened. GuMiHo still has some allowance as far as moving on into the later stages of the game, and in fact, with so few battles happening, there really haven't been any battles. GuMiHo's the one with he had a bigger bank, and that's why I just threw down 3 command centers at once. This 4th base at the gold is not only giving him a gold base, but it's also giving him a further jumping off point and defensive point as well that he can fall back to. And Elazer, you know, he might actually have some problems elsewhere. The problem at this point in time might just be that he didn't do anything at all against the push. The hatchery does go down, and this is when Elazer finally decides to actually take care of that forward position Terran army, but off of creep is losing him quite a few banelings as the tanks do get the focus fire. We do have other skirmishes going around here. The 4th base apparently being dropped. The 5th also, or the natural actually, also trying to be dropped, but Elazer does eventually push that back. It's really about the loss of life on the front lines and his continued problem getting on the other side of the map. And oh my god, so many overlords. Oh, Jesus. Oh, no. That was a lot of overlords that were about to die. 7 in total in this game. That did supply block Elazer, and he is already trying to fix that, but a little bit problematic. More army on the front lines for GuMiHo as he is determined to keep this anchor. And all his extra bases are also done, so he can start taking this left base, this far left base. I mean, GuMiHo is thriving post 8 racks, and Elazer is the one that is struggling. Not able to once again get on the other side of the map seems to be the issue, similar to the first game, but obviously a very different composition. Bottom right base never got to mining, being harassed now. Obviously, you still want that up and running. Same with the left side. Some intentional sacrifice, I believe, of Marines on top of the Banelings right there. 3-3 finishing up at the same time for pretty much both parties. Ultras pop out with Chitinous Plating to try and help, but only help so much. The Marauder count had already grown significantly thanks to the additional 3 barracks, making the 8 racks going into tech labs. So the Ultras weren't just a, boop, surprise, you're game over, like they are when they go up against pure Marine tank. Sorry, just woke up. But pure Marine tank, couple of Blinding Clouds or Abducts on the tanks, and then Ultras versus pure Marine. Beautiful for the Zerg player. You have 13 Marauders that are also off creep and able to focus fire the Ultras without being surrounded. We know how that looks. That's been around since the beginning of StarCraft. So, of course, you do want the strongest possible counter to the Ultras, which is going to be the Ghosts. Not going to lie. But point is, the bridge to that, the amount of Marauders you have, was good enough for GuMiHo. But now he is going to be getting ghosts as well, as more bases for the Terran also come down. Elazer only blocking out the one. Again, the left side is pretty much open, and it is mined out as well. Left side of Elazer's side of the map not going so hot. Neither is the right, actually. 2 bases at once going down for Elazer, who isn't at a point where he desperately needs the minerals, I suppose, but we're very close to it. If this means that he can't get another hatchery up and running within the next 2 minutes, then he will probably take at least one battle, a half battle, whatever you want to call it, and actually start to feel the pain of losing out on bases, because he doesn't have many minerals in his main or his natural. His third base also starting to get mined out. And GuMiHo just is in total control of the map. He has made a line in the sand so that Elazer is starting to try and get his toe over with some creep spread. I don't know if this is it, man. This is tank sieged up, Liberator sieged up, a planetary to work with as well, but I guess a lot of the Terran army not here to help out, so this is a successful blitz on top of GuMiHo's gold base, but it's not really enough, I would say, because GuMiHo has so many extra orbital commands, so many extra just basic command centers, I think. Actually, it's only orbitals, to be fair, but the gold base wasn't even truthfully necessary for him. He still has his 4th base up and running. He still saved so much army is the real problem. You did take down their economy, but you didn't take on the army, and that could be a huge problem for Elazer. Now, this is on creep as GuMiHo also comes in, dropping his army on top of the fight, which is not ideal. Medevac's not involved on the right side against this Ultra either, and this was about the most sloppy engagement that GuMiHo could have taken on the counter-offensive, making a huge mistake right there. Actually, kind of similar to last game. Last game was a more morbid game for him, though. It was already not looking so hot, but this one I thought was fine. But then he goes on to creep, thinking that Elazer was no longer maxed out because he took down the planetary, I guess, and he made a huge mistake again. Not acknowledging the remax that Elazer would still have, because honestly, there haven't been that many battles. It'd be very different if a lot of these battles had happened all in favor of GuMiHo, but now we just see the infestation running rampant on the Terran side of the map. Ghosts trying to get their snipes in, finally allowed to do so. Ravagers getting taken on the backside is good signs, but GuMiHo's supply in the gutter. 120 versus 190 as Elazer brings forth the power of the swarm. The Ultras will eventually go down as well, but all the Lings coming in. 8 more Ultras as well. Elazer waiting for his time to shine, finally given the opportunity. And GuMiHo is going to be shaking his head at that one. He was in such a powerful position. He had such an army and map control. He could have gotten a stronger economy if he had maybe gone a little more aggressive on putting his command centers down. And he could have just frankly had his army alive to work with. Could have taken a more cautious approach, going for the counter-offensive, and then dipped out when he realized it wasn't actually the time to go. And instead, he is now facing a almost like overcharged Elazer, overcharged with confidence. Fungals on the backside coming through to end the game. Elazer, the 2-1 victory. We'll now move on to face Clem, who is even better at TVZ and is also European. So